In his dream, Cody was walking through the desert. He could see the setting sun in the distance. The sky was blood orange with blue and yellow hues dancing across the horizon. A flock of birds were flying off in the setting sun. Were they on fire? He couldn't tell, but it was one of the most terrifyingly beautiful things he'd ever seen. He spun around with his hands raised over his head, and his heart fluttered. He could see a city of lights in the distance, so he started walking towards them. Hypnotized by its mirage, his heart started to race as he tried to start walking, but then he realized he wasn't moving. He tried to pick up his pace, but he was moving in slow motion. He tried to run, but he couldn't will his legs to do so. When he looked down, his legs were sinking into the sand beneath his feet, and suddenly, he dropped into a pit. He couldn't see anything but the sand in front of him. He noticed there was another movement behind him and below him. Snakes. It was a sea of snakes sliding over his feet and wrapping around his legs. Giant snakes, black snakes. He could feel their scales brushing up against his bare skin. The sensation sent shivers to his core. His entire being was in a state of fear. The sun had finally set, and all he can do was look up at the full moon above his head. The light of the moon gave him strength, and he felt a calm start to take over. He felt his form turning to light, his own glow burning bright from deep within him. He felt control starting to return. Then, all of a sudden, he felt one of the snakes begin to wrap itself tightly around his leg and dig its fangs into his flesh. He let out a scream, but no sound came out. One after the other, the snakes attached themselves to him and bit into his flesh. The pain was so real, he tried waking himself, but couldn't. He looked back up towards the moon. It was now a blood red. Suddenly, a dark figure appeared in front of him. He couldn't make out who or what it was, but the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. The fiery shadow had a black diamond lodged in the middle of his forehead. It crept up to him and whispered in his ear. Its voice was full of sinister and vile hatred.
I can make you scream.
Fear whispered in his ear. All Cody could do was breathe and try not. He took the blade and jammed it into Cody's stomach, right below his belly button. The pain was like nothing he'd ever felt before. He thought he could have died 1,000 times over. Flames scorched the inside of his body to the point he felt the heat burning behind his eyes. The energy in him exploded, and he screamed from the very pit of his soul.